And this has been going on. Most of the people who have anger among people and
the question of accession of the state of Jammu and Kashmir to India or Pakistan would be decided through the democratic method of free and impartial plebiscite.
Today, I would like to draw your attention to a humanitarian crisis in the internationally disputed areas of Indian-occupied Kashmir. The Kashmir question remains as one of the oldest unresolved international problems in the world. In the Indian-occupied Kashmir, human rights violations by Indian occupation forces is a routine matter. Today, not a single household is left that has not lost a woman, a child, or a man to this bloodthirst of occupation.
Pakistan supported these resolutions, and even Prime Minister Nehru said in 1951, we had given our pledge to the people of Kashmir and subsequently to the United Nations. We stood by it and we stand by it today. Let the people of Kashmir decide. This resolution is still on the books. It's still in effect that the United Government of India should live up to a commitment that it made in the United Nations when they promised that the people of Kashmir would be...
Affiliation of the entire state or any part thereof would not constitute a disposition of the state in accordance with the principles accepted by both the parties in Security Council.
The art killing machines are wreaking havoc on helpless Kashmir society. They are engaged in wanton vandalism, genocide of Kashmiri Muslims with no compunction. Over 7.5 lakh Indian troops are round the clock engaged in massacre, mass arrests, arson and humiliation of Kashmiris.
I think it is clear now that the imperative of reaching a solution to the dispute in Kashmir has become an international issue of the highest priority. The world must pay attention. The world is held hostage to this tragic conflict, which goes against all of our time-honored faith, not only in self-determination, but in democracy, in development. In Srinagar, you have more than 500,000 troops barracked within 5 minutes walk. Are they doing anything about developing the infrastructure of the region? No. What they do is to terrify young people and young students if they see them smirking or laughing or joking or walking in the street, and sometimes they take them away and they're never seen again. I flew into Srinagar, and on the way back to the airport, my doctor friend who was driving me, we were stopped 5 times within 150 yards before reaching the airport, each time by a different unit of a different regiment of the Indian Army. And at the 4th time, and each time we were asked to get out of the car, my bags were looked at, his car was looked at under the hood, we were body searched, we got back into the car, and finally I said to him, why do they keep doing this time and time again? He said, they don't trust each other. Now, if the Indian troops don't trust each other, how can the people who they are supposed to be protecting and defending trust them?
Since 1989, more than 83,000 have been martyred. Thousands of youth have been tortured to death. Villages and towns torched, markets and bazaars to ground. Political activists have been blasted. Attempts have been made at the lives of political leaders of the freedom movement. Intellectuals, professors, doctors, human rights activists and scholars have been religious places and mosques have been desecrated and demolished. The desecration of the Dargah Hazrat Bal Shrine, sacrilege of Chirare-e-Sharif are but some of the illustrations. Kashmiris are the victims of massive abuses and gross human rights by India. The United Nations recognizes their right to determine their future through fair and impartial under UN supervision. Article 1D of Indian Constitution encourages settlement of international disputes by arbitration.
Almost overnight, occupied Jammu and Kashmir became one of the most militarized regions, concentration of over 500,000 Indian troops. to cover blood-stained hands and to hoodwink the world opinion, India again held sham elections in 1990.
The sufferings of Kashmiri people are and painful. The methods of torture used by Indian forces against innocent Kashmiris are so brutal and barbaric that they have put even Nazis behind.
This is the worst street violence here for years. After several hours, the police lose patience. First tear gas. Their lessons, some don't survive. In the next street, 14-year-old Javed was shot dead by soldiers when they opened fire on demonstrators. He was his parents' favourite, the youngest child, chosen to take over his father's business. His family insists innocent bystander.
But that's democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. As we turn to the award-winning Indian author Arundhati Roy facing possible arrest in India on sedition charges after recent comments she made about Kashmir. Earlier today, an Indian politician from the right-wing BJP party filed a written complaint after she publicly advocated for Kashmir independence and challenged India's claim that Kashmir is a, quote, integral part of India. The area of Kashmir has been at the center of a decades-long dispute between India and Pakistan. Arundhati Roy made the comment at a conference organized to call on India to formally admit Kashmir, an internationally recognized dispute. If charged and convicted of sedition, Arundhati Roy could face up to life in prison. On Tuesday, she defended her statements made at the conference. She wrote, "I said what millions of people here say every day. I spoke about justice for the people of Kashmir who live under one of the most brutal military occupations in the world." Roy went on, quote, "Pity the nation that has to siders for speaking their minds. Pity the nation that needs to jail those who ask for justice while communal killers, mass murderers, corporate scamsters, looters, rapists, and those who prey on the poorest of the poor roam free." Well, last month I had a chance the author of The God of Small Things, Arundhati Roy, about Kashmir. We spoke in London. She began by describing how Kashmir is the unfinished business of the partition of India in 1947.
The 1990s, which is when, at the same time that the war in Afghanistan, the jihad, America won its jihad in Afghanistan, and India realigned itself and became, what it is now, sort of completely aligned with the U.S. and the whole problem in Kashmir, the militant armed struggle for independence. I mean, there was always a struggle for independence. It's not independence. It's not ever been really a part of India, which is why it's ridiculous for the Indian government to keep saying it's an integral part of India. But that armed struggle claimed the lives of 68,000 people, because India today has 500,000 troops manning that little valley. It's the highest, most zone in the world. India has done everything wrong. Apart from a military occupation, it has completely rigged elections. It has changed that valley into a little sort of puddle, a little of spies and informers, networks and torture chambers. And today, into a stage where people just had enough. Now you don't even know who the rulers are, or leaders of the uprising are, because it's just people who cannot take it anymore. But the government still is quite busy trying to manage the crisis. There's all sorts of shady things going on, claiming more business buildings on fire, when it does look very much as though the agencies are doing that themselves in order to once again paint this uprising in a different light. But the fact is that it's a bit like feeding a population heavy metal in its diet all the time. That metal, that toxicity, it just lives in the body, and it goes into different places at different times, but the body never gets rid of it. And now that toxicity has reached a stage where I really think that until the international community somehow pays attention, this small valley is going to be just squashed by this completely, intransigent juggernaut that is the Indian state, that will not back off, doing something absolutely immoral, absolutely as bad as it is in any other kind of occupation, including the Israeli occupation of Palestine, But Kashmir, nobody talks about. course, I spent a lot of time there.
And so, how does it fuel what is happening in Pakistan and maybe even going into Afghanistan?
I mean, obviously, Pakistan and India is the toxic center of that relationship, and unless it's resolved, I don't think any part of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India can be that whole area is like getting more and more toxic, you know. And what right now, the fact is that the U.S. is deep in all of it, and as far as because of what it's been doing in Pakistan and Afghanistan all these years, right now in India, I mean, the Congress government can't resolve Kashmir on its own because the right-wing BJP is there to stymie it at any point of time, you know. So it does need now an intervention from a larger community that is saying to this country that this is just not acceptable.
What do you think needs to happen?
I think there has to be a kind of undiplomatic, if you like, intervention. A lot of people from outside need to look at that issue very carefully and stop looking at India as if, oh, it's just this market where we can, you know, it's a good financial destination, so let it do what it wants in Kashmir, because the whole thing is going to unravel. So I do think that even the Americans need to look into Kashmir and you know, talk about it, since they are involved in creating this cesspool there now.
Is what? Who is fighting for what?
The Kashmir. See, Jammu and Kashmir used to be an independent kingdom at the time of partition. And when partition happened, all independent princely states were told that they could decide whether they wanted to go with India or with Pakistan, which is a bit strange, you know. I mean, what was the moral behind that? But anyway, in Kashmir there had already been a movement against the king, who was actually a Hindu king ruling a majority Muslim state. So really didn't have any moral authority at the time. And when partition happened, because of how it happened, he signed a letter of, you know, asking India to send in troops. But that was based on the fact that they would decide later, and that plebiscite never took place, you know, and the situation just became worse and worse and worse. So right now, what they are fighting for is what they call Azadi, which is independence from India and from Pakistan. Every day the anger increases, and a few more are killed, and the anger increases.
It has tremendous power because it has billions invested in India. The latest is nuclear power deals, U.S. corporations there, and of course the U.S. pours billions into Pakistan. So, what do you think the U.S. can do, and not just the government, but people calling for justice? What do you feel is just?
I think, for example, Obama is going to India now, and India is desperately trying to sort of, you know, push. Like for the Commonwealth Games that are happening now, they are pushing all the beggars into some park and, you know, putting billboards around them so that no one will see them. And they're trying to do something similar in Kashmir, desperately trying to shut the problem away from public scrutiny before he comes. But I think that the most important thing is now not to allow India or Pakistan to speak for Kashmiri people, you know, because Kashmiri people need a space in which to think. They've just lived all their lives with a polythene bag over their heads and a gun pointed at their temples. Somebody needs to create the space for them to be able to say what they want, because this is a whole population that is living in the most insufferable conditions.
June, when police killed a teenager in downtown Srinagar, and the general perception is that he was killed for no fault of his, and he was not part of any protest. So he was killed, and there were then the police fired at his funeral procession. More people were killed, and this has been going on. Most of the people who have been killed in police firing have been teenagers, very young people, and so there's a lot of anger among people, and the government.
मारो करो 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 मारो मारो आजा आजा मारो मार उसको
आप हमारे काम में मत रख।
मैं दखल नहीं दे रहा। मैं इसको बता रहा हूँ।